partner was close to get tenure, said, we're here, we're risking our career, our reputation, because we believe in this, we'll make it work no matter what. Okay, we'll find a way. And if we fail, well, I cannot guarantee you will succeed, but you figure it out. Why are we here? Now, if I tell you we're going to make 50 million in 2 years, I'll be pulling it from thin air. And they appreciated that. And I never looked at, unless you sell in an industry where you have established business models and you compete on pricing using a disruptive approach, either technical approach or business approach, so you know how you're going to take market share. When you go in a space like what we did, it was a non-existent, we were establishing a niche space basically, it was anybody's guess, right? We had never spoken about pricing models. How would I stand with any credibility in front of potential investors and say, you know what, I'm going to make 50, 60, 70. I would be lying through my teeth. So they appreciate that. And I think that happens, that's a common mistake. Over the couple of dozen deals that I was called in to offer an opinion, I try to follow most of them. And from my perspective, I focused on only one thing. Of course, technology and the product is important. Let me come back to this. That's what matters. Try to figure out the people. If you think you have in front of you a good team, if you're an entrepreneur and you think you have a strong team, you are going to win, no matter what. It may take you a long time to figure out how to raise the money. You may have to pitch to investors that come from a different perspective. I pitched to investors that didn't want to hear anything but financials. At the time that financials, by virtue of what we were doing, could not really be cooked in a meaningful way. Okay? But those tended to be VCs with less experience, and I think none of them is around. So, this is not a secret. Everybody knows that. People do matter. In my experience, it's only people that matter. And I'm quite opinionated about this. So that's one lesson that the Bytemobile experience helped me galvanize. And I can say it was something that I always felt about, maybe because in my academic career, I gained this experience. I could see I was hiring students, right? So I sharpened my ability to tell, those committed from those not committed. Some students were there because their parents wanted them to be there. Could have been brilliant, but the issue of commitment is very important. Of course you have to go through a business plan, because that puts discipline, of course. You've got to show to potential investors that you know how to put together balance sheet, how to mind your expenses, especially when the money comes from other pockets, etc. But I think the level of attention we pay on revenue projections, etc., is oftentimes misplaced. Enough said. The thing that really realized, again, pure experience, personal experience, about founders. One thing, from my perspective, the thing that really kept me awake at nights was the fear of failure. And the fear of failure in me was very, very strong. And it became very personal, sometimes in a way that was, if you really philosophize about it, it was even misplaced. It was even patronizing. I was thinking about, at any given time, 300 families, that if something happens and we go under, 3 families would be in limbo. Well, that's not true, of course, because here, you walk out one door, you walk into the next door, and you get a better salary. Okay, but that was not true in Champaign. That was not true certainly in Greece or in other locations in the world. You face rough seas, even when financially you do very well. And we had our fair share of that. Another lesson I learned and again, I walked into this fairly self-aware, was the common founder syndrome, that I'm the founder, I've got to be the CEO, if not the king, right? This is something that I had, I had heated debates with my good friend and co-founder about this when we were starting. I said, listen, Marion, we're technologists. We've got to focus on what we know, how to do best, and bring the best experienced people to lead the company. Santander remembers that. Is it the best solution to bring an external CEO? Well, at the time I would have said absolutely, and I called our investors and I said, listen, part of the reason we went with Benchmark is because you guys promised us your ecosystem that would allow us to bring in top-notch CEOs, and they did eventually. It's a mixed bag, but once a founder is not too much how to say, vested in this attitude that I've got to be the CEO no matter what, I think the chances of success are much higher. Again, something went on. Vices and virtues. Anybody can name many virtues, and we all know them. Vice, well, hubris. Hubris is fatal. Hubris is fatal with customers, is fatal with employees, is fatal with partners, is fatal everywhere. And I felt very strongly about this. Another, on corporate culture, etc., and buzzwords that we're all familiar with. Oftentimes, people talk about corporate culture, and what they really do is do as I say. But of course, when it comes to actual practice, they never do as they say. And the other buzzword that really gets me irritated is shareholder value. Creating shareholder value. And for 12 years, I didn't really know why it bothered me. I knew it was rather hypocritical, because you really care about yourself, let's be honest. Okay? Well, you line up your pockets, and by virtue of what you do, you end up creating shareholder value. That's fine. It's win-win. But it still bothered me until I met Mark Templeton. This is the CEO of Citrix. And kudos to this gentleman. He's a visionary. But as far as I'm concerned, the Citrix acquisition of Bytemobile, from my perspective, was sealed in the first 5 minutes I met their executive team. Myself, our CEO, Hatim Tiabji, our CFO, Tom Hubbs, these were extremely experienced gentlemen. Hatim is the chairman also of Best Buy. Tom Hubbs had taken 5 companies public. We're very fortunate to have Tom lead the company financially. A couple of us joined the team, and we went to meet the Citrix executive team in Fort Lauderdale on April 4. So we walked into the meeting room, and everybody was already in place. Mark Templeton walks in and looks at us, we're 5, 6 of us, and says, let me tell you what our values are. Respect, integrity, and humility. I said, humility? Never heard that in boardrooms. Humility. I can tell you another word that starts from H, but not humility, maybe hubris. So it was extremely refreshing. And then he said something else. Citrix is not about shareholder value. We don't believe in this nonsense. Citrix is all about happy customers and happy employees. Shareholder value is a corollary that follows directly. And, I paused for a second and I said, hey, how come I didn't think about it for 12 years? That's exactly what bothers me. And I'm telling you from the heart, I speak literally from the heart, that's exactly how I felt. Okay? And it makes great sense. You really forget shareholder value. Focus on your customer. By focusing on the customer, it means that you try to build the best product that you can build. And you really care about your customer. You care about your employees. Shareholder value is almost automatic, right? Now, when you think about it, yeah, it's more than obvious. But it's still eluding, at least to some of us. And I think that's plenty.
Thank you, Constantine. A really amazing story. Let me just start with one question before we open it to the audience. I know you mentioned, like, when you, after 2 years in 86, when your friend, colleague started the company, you wanted you to join, and you said, heck no, I'm not going to join. But on reflecting back, when you were, growing up in Greece, did you ever think that you'd end up starting a company and obviously making it successful, etc.?
No way. When actually I knew what I wanted to do when I was about 14 years old. I read an article about Wernher von Braun. Actually, no, I was younger. I was more like 11 years old. It was 1970. And I wanted to become an aeronautical engineer to build rockets. And it was at that point that I realized I want to come to the US. But there was no way you could study aeronautical engineering in Greece. So I ended up, somebody who came from Tufts University, he was a professor, he said, be good in math, okay? And that's how I started. Math became my passion. Then I realized, I started programming the first Citrix Systems using punch cards, and I fell in love with computers. And that was, I never looked back. But I never, for some reason, academia, and I think, especially the Indian community probably can relate to that. You grow up, academia was something that was like a dream for most of us. Becoming a professor, was the ultimate success in life. So I never thought about industry. Even when I graduated with my PhD, I interviewed at 10 universities and only 2 industries, Bell Labs and Yorktown Heights, only because they were research labs.
So let me open it to the audience. Looks like there are a lot of hands. How about we start with the gentleman there, that hand went up higher than yours.
Yeah, hi. Thank you. It was very informative. I've been in the mobile industry for a very long time, so I've sold to a lot of the MNOs. You're very lucky you still have hair. Mine's already gone. So, the question I have for you is, you put up a chart about 135 countries, 60 countries, 135 operators. I didn't see any operators from the Indian subcontinent there. I've sold to a whole lot of them. Was there any preventive?
Great question.
Since then, have you covered them? I mean, because I sold to all of them, so I know the problems there. I just was very curious.
Did you collect money?
That's a great question. I can tell you, we are without getting into details, I cannot disclose details at this point because it's very timely. But we feel that we'll have a breakthrough soon. We tried in India. Especially given that Hatim was from India. I expect Hatim to help us a little more, but Hatim was not really well connected in that space with MNOs. A lot of interest. I pitched to the city of Idea. He was almost captivated, but things just moved very slowly. And what I realized, that I didn't know that, our sales force knew, was that you cannot really make progress without the right partner in India. So we tried our hand, we did not land the right partner. I think phase 2 was more successful, and hopefully we'll have progress very soon.
Was there any pricing issue at all? Because typically the margins are extremely low,
Right.
and they have the models are fairly fixed, and they tend to go with a revenue-based compensation for vendors irrespective of whether you're selling a big refrigerator kind of a switch or a back-end solution which is actually a service provision layer.
That's true.
Was there a...
That's true. Yeah, we faced part of that. Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Well, I can just shout. Maybe I'll just speak louder. So thank you for sharing your thoughts on those revenue projections. That really resonated there. As a founder of a very early stage startup, I've been recently receiving questions about things like break-even points. And I find myself a little confused by the question because for a company that plans to grow rapidly for 5 to 10 years, my natural instinct is to respond with a counter question saying, what is the level of acceleration or market penetration that you're assuming? Because you can have multiple break-even points, and depending what those assumptions are, I don't know how to answer this question meaningfully. Is there like an optimal assumption that you need to make as an entrepreneur and just give an answer? Or
I don't think so. I think being very frank, very, very direct about this, right? My answer would be, I can give you a break point, close to zero. I can give you a break point, at 10 million. I can give you a break point, just tell me where. I'll give you the
I get that answer.
Right. So I can fire half the company. I can, So the bottom line is, what do we want to achieve long term, right? We're looking for growth. We're looking for market share, and you have to have a sound strategy to get there. So, being again mindful of expenses is part of our business. We should be very careful. I tend to be on the other extreme of this, and I can offer you stories to laugh with. I'm a guy that loves to stay at $70 motels as long as the seats are clean, right? And I just could not come to terms with some of our sales guys, very successful people, that had a taste for $300 hotels. I just could not. So it gave me real pain early on, and I gave up after all, because you focus on the ants and you miss the elephant. But when it comes to investors, I think being frank about how you're going, and making sure that you are aligned with respect to the key objectives, okay, the timeline, and the what-ifs that you may face, right? So you have a couple of scenarios, contingency plans, basically, to account for, so that you do your financial planning based on that. Contingency plan 1, contingency plan 2, and this is the best I can do.
Chris?
If they don't resonate to that, I don't think you're talking to the right investors.
Hi, Constantine. Very fascinating discussion. Extremely thrilling to hear every single word that you're speaking from the heart. My questions are many, and forgive me if I'm asking too many questions because I want to give the other people a lot of time on the floor and so forth. So I'll just rapid fire, ask them, and then you may choose to decline answering for lack of time or whatever reason. So several things popped up in my mind when you were discussing many things. One was so I'll just say it as questions, each one. One was the fallout with Raghavan, with our Raghavan initially. The second portion that I was curious about is you mentioned a good thing, which is there's an epiphany when you meet with the right date and you want to make them your partner. What about the wrong dates? What led you to believe that those were the wrong dates until you, of course, met with Mark Templeton and so forth? What was the reason? And the third point I would like to ask you about is really to do with, in the space of optimizations, you had a very good starting confidence that you will be able to optimize certain things in the packet, for example, in data, whereas most people optimize networks and so forth. So, and in that inverted, triangle slide that you showed, you had the packet optimization, spectrum efficiency, and network, all of them represented there. How did you decide to focus on the right set of things as a mix of optimization, and then fragment it into products for different purposes, if you will? So a lot of different aspects I would like to ask you about. Sorry if I'm asking too many things.
No, I'll be happy to answer. Let me start with the first questions because the last question is overloaded. I think we can can stay back and I can give you some of the backdrop. Yeah,
Fallout, dating.
the fallout about.
Focusing on which one to optimize.
So let me start with the dating. We were, again, I cannot talk about specifics here, of course, but we had more than a couple of offers, and we had more than a couple that were very serious, right? In my view, and again, this is a 1 month story. I'm not saying I said this was my perspective, my view, right? When I said this is done, the investors were the ones who really would make the decision, right? Because it was done for me. Was it done for them? They had the veto power. But I knew something, and our investors knew something, the same thing, that it really boils down to people again. For an acquisition to work, the investor may have 99% of the equity, but if the investor, it's a serious investor, right? And if the investor realizes that the people really reject the idea, based on non-financial grounds, the investor is boxed in the corner. Okay, so if you have investors who are partners, they'll work with you. So that's what I realized, that we had the right people. And therefore, the financial aspect, as important as it is, number one, right, becomes relatively easier to address, And it didn't have to be necessarily, if you have a deal with people that just don't gel together, and the deal is, 10% higher than the next deal where the people truly gel together, what do you get, right? And I think smart investors would say, yeah, okay, I understand. I'm not going to go for, a premium and risk losing the thing, because eventually even the buyer wants to have that chemistry in place. So that's what I meant. The fallout was... there was no real fallout. No. I love Bergman. I mean, he's... we laughed and cried together, and he's a great guy. He and I had different opinions, and he decided on his own. I was surprised that he decided to move on, because we had a solid story. We were really on the upswing. He was restless. That's as simple as that. But I think he was probably the happiest guy, despite the fact that he stayed with us only for a year. Once he saw the check, I think nobody else was happier than Bergman. So I'm glad for him.
Thank you for the wonderful sharing. So you've now worked on the mobile and the service provider area. Do you see this technology applied to other areas? Like, what are your thoughts now that you've joined with Citrix and the cloud and stuff like that? Besides the service provider segment, are you looking to also reuse it for other markets, verticals?
Good question. So there is, yes, we have done a lot of brainstorming with Citrix. There are some great opportunities and great synergies between what we do and what Citrix does. So we look at helping operators. We look at providing solutions to operators that will help them literally re-architect the network and the way they do business, and align their revenue growth with the CapEx and the OpEx growth. And I cannot again get into too many details, but we believe that, I very much believe that all that part of the network that is closed and based on proprietary protocols is going to become an IP network very soon. So the enterprise type of companies are going to be very well positioned, and the big providers like the big vendors like Ericsson and Nokia, Siemens, etc., are not well prepared for that intentionally, because that's where they make the money, by keep selling the same almost obsolete solutions to carriers. So now we can afford to be a little more aggressive, and we have certainly big plans. And I decided to stay on with Citrix because the outlook is very exciting.
Constantine, you talked a little bit about bringing on a new CEO, but you didn't go into a whole lot of details. You just said that eventually Benchmark delivered on their promise to bring it in. Are there some learnings you can share about that experience?
So, yeah, I expected, Benchmark to help us bring an experienced CEO, ideally somebody who had sold to operators. I had no context with the space, but I knew the obvious, that if I cannot sell, a CEO who has never operated in that space would not be able to sell. So I didn't want just the experience of a CEO. I wanted somebody with, who had built a successful business selling to carriers, which is tough. The place, that space is full of carcasses, right? I don't know exactly why it took a little longer than I would have wished, but they gave us no choice. Hatim had gone into retirement. He came on board for 3 months. He loved it so much that we went through a CEO search, and we literally interviewed 30 candidates. Many of them had run public companies, and we never could come to an agreement as to whether we found Mr. or Mrs. Right. We interviewed some powerful men and women. And I realized Hatim was just in love with, the whole gig, and he stayed on.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, that's fine.
Go ahead, please.
Okay,
Go ahead, ladies
thank you. So thank you, Constantine, for sharing your life experience with us. One thing you mentioned that when you expand your business, you started kind of in Europe, and then you carefully went into Asia. So I'm kind of curious about whether you had issue with IP protection issue, or what's your experience there, and how do you structure to make sure that you're protected? How can you, just give us a little bit of experience where you experienced that?
Again, again, India is a very different market than China, right? And if you want to be successful, you have to have a strategy that is Chinese, strategy for the Chinese market, strategy for the Indian market, and now a strategy for the African market, by the way. Okay, that's where the growth is. Just look at the numbers, right? And those are emerging markets that have an order of magnitude more potential for revenue. But again, the margins are slim, and more than anything else, we knew that you need to have the right partner, right? So we did try with Wison in China. We were, successful. We managed to sell to China Mobile and China Telecom. But we want to establish the anchor points, the beachhead, the beachfronteries, to be able to make progress. With respect to IP protection, we really did not. We could hear anecdotes, but again, we were very lucky because we had people that we had full confidence in that helped us build the team. So we never had real issues there. So it was a matter of cost, primarily, and being able to invest where we knew that, we had to have the necessary conditions to make progress.
So you did have quite a few direct competitors in your business, but most of them, as I know, have sort of disappeared. So what would you say are like top 2 or 3 things that made you guys stick around and be successful while others withered away?
We're still trying to figure it out, Paul. No. Well, again, being steadfast and on what you do and try to do the best, right? So we really invested 20% of our revenue, I mean of our of our revenue basically back into R&D. So we really put major emphasis on innovation, huge emphasis on innovation. We came up with, we invest in video optimization, right? And we came up with dynamic bandwidth shading, a very innovative way of doing video optimization without touching the quality, when everybody else was doing video transcoding. Okay, so I think a big part has to do with investing in innovation. Another big part has to do with your sales force and creating believers within the carriers. So we pitched to CTOs. We established very strong rapport with CTOs at Deutsche Telekom and Vodafone, a few anchor accounts in the geographies that became basically our base, our power base in those geographies. So once you have Vodafone, right, and you have 26 networks for Vodafone, it doesn't really matter if your competitor takes one or two minor networks in Europe.
But you took on that direct, which is unusual.
That's correct. Yeah. That was all direct. Initial focus was Europe. Then we started focusing in North America. And we had several debates about Asia. Again, we would almost help our competitors go to geographies where we knew that they would face no competition from us, but they would expend a lot of resources and they would be unlikely to succeed. It sounds we didn't really put any diabolic plan to do so, but we were talking about that, right? I mean, we were very cognizant of the fact that our competitors are going to go to a certain South American group operator, and we knew that there was no way they would penetrate that operator, right? So they would do that. With respect to companies like OpenWave, that's a much bigger story, and that's a sad story because OpenWave was a fantastic company, and I watched them very closely, and I think that all in all, if I were to say what really brought OpenWave down, even though I have no knowledge, inside knowledge, just academically speaking, I would point to that word starting from H, hubris.
I had a question. I think your very early work started at the University of Illinois, and I wanted to ask, were there any IP rights or issues that you needed to work through with the university? How did that play out?
Are you affiliated with the University of Illinois? So I can give you the right answer.
My partner is, he is, and that's exactly what we're trying to work through right now.
Let me be very direct, as I like to be. When we started, I negotiated with the University of Illinois. It was a very, very unfriendly environment. They could not learn their lesson from Netscape at the time. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with how they misplaced their cards with Netscape. A lot of other companies started at the University of Illinois. PayPal, two of the three founders of YouTube came out of the U of I. Even Oracle, right? And the University of Illinois never got the benefit of being the genesis, the place of genesis of these companies, AMD, etc. Partly because they didn't have a sound policy with respect to IP, licensing IP to inventors, to faculty members, to former students, etc. And I cannot say that I was, I found real, conducive environment, but they were not unfriendly either. It was just stagnant, okay? Fast forward, last week I was at the University of Illinois with Klaus Osterman, who was the visionary and the guy from Citrix who was watching us, and he led really the whole effort on the Citrix side, and he's VP of engineering, and the University of Illinois, the president, President Easter, gave a very warm, very generous, very welcoming reception at his house, at the president's house, to welcome Klaus and Latif and Don Dixon from Trident Capital. And the head of RTMO spent time with us. It's a totally different reality. So, long story to say, I believe from what I know and what I see, the University of Illinois now has its act together. It's a great place to start a business. You'll find only support from the faculty and the administration.
I'm a database guy, so my question may be a stupid question, but let me ask it anyway. I can't quite figure out exactly what this is all about, in the sense that I thought you might make a reference to software-defined networks, for example, and I didn't hear that. Also, what's the difference between what you did versus what the content distribution networks used to do, Akamai and so on?
Oh, very different, very, very different. I just didn't want, I was not quite sure. I thought I was getting already too technical, okay? Well, Akamai, so content distribution is part of our strategy. Well, caching, smart hierarchical caching is part of our solution. Content CDNs have nothing to do with what we do. CDNs, the optimization or the benefit of CDN is that it brings the content very close to where it's consumed, as opposed to, so as a result, basically you have low latency, right? And you pay the transport cost only once. We're talking about the radio access network is a very esoteric, very closed network. There is no CDN there.
But then the software-defined networking, I thought, was supposed to make all this become more standard.
Well, that in everywhere except, well, software-defined network is still evolving, number one.
I heard a talk at ACM Sigmart by this professor who's now at Google leading all this, talking about, this is going back to, I think, your question, Preeti, about where else could you apply all this in a more traditional data center kind of environment, especially now with the cloud.
Absolutely, I didn't answer this question. Yeah, you're right.
And that's where they're using SDNs, right? So
right.
Google is now big time into this from what this guy said at the Sigmart conference.
Yeah, absolutely
But
correct.
software-defined networking, it's more about all the software from controrling the dumb devices. It's I mean,
it's more or less orthogonal.
It's more of traffic optimization,
yeah,
right? What
that's correct.
You were focused
It's
on.
orthogonal. Think of the OSI stack, the 7 layers of the OSI stack, and think about compression, think about object substitution, think about transcoding, think about eliminating fluff, like cascaded style sheets in web pages, or eliminating a lot of fluff that is embedded in video, or delivering the video fragments a lot smarter. You know, that has nothing to do with CDNs. It's an orthogonal technology, right?
But then there was already, things like, I don't know, WebSphere, transcoder and such things that tried doing these things in a more traditional web context, right? So,
Yeah.
So that's where I'm not sure,
content providers.
These kinds of telecom networks are so different from traditional web-based optimizations of various companies.
These are closed networks. AT&T or Verizon, these are private. Think of a giant Wi-Fi, private Wi-Fi, that covers the entire country. And it's private, right? Problem is that the amount, or the volume of data that is delivered to devices via these networks keeps going up, right? Exponentially, growing exponentially. Number two, if you look at the latency, the end-to-end latency from device to content server, right? If you go over 3G, for example, 80% of the latency is due to that network. So Akamai will bring the content very close to that route, and that's it, right? So Akamai addresses 20% of the problem. We address 80% of the problem because we're in the network.
And with respect to Ramesh's question, given that you anyway had a deal with Vodafone and they're in India, I would have thought it would be a piece of cake for you to...
So we're in India. We are in India, Vodafone India. But I would like to be in Bharti.
And that will add Africa also to you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Vodafone India, you know, with all the due respect, doesn't count a whole lot for the Indian market. Unlike, you know, Bharti, Airtel.
I'm with IBM, so I know deep.
But if you're with IBM, you may know a little bit more than what I said here.
So we'll have two more questions, and then we'll have some more time here. You can interact with Constantine. Okay.
Whatever I understand from the slides, the network optimization problems you have solved, it would have gone through kind of adaptive algorithms. So do you think with this open flow initiative, these problems need to be solved in a different manner? Because the way it has to be programmed, it has to be done through a centralized controller. How it is going to have impact on the existing algorithms?
It's like another thesis.
That's in a nutshell, I don't think so. I know it's very cryptic, but we need to talk about OpenFlow, my reservations about OpenFlow, and how the networks evolve. But so what we do, to give you a very quick answer, what we do can bring the benefit of the network either from a centralized location that somehow sees all the traffic, or from a fully distributed, can be right at the base station. In principle, easier said than done, of course. So I still see it as, again, rather orthogonal, rather independent to OpenFlow. But
one question.
Adaptive is about, is embedded in everything we do. Adaptive is the operative word.
Yeah. East wants to ask you a question.
So it's not actually a question, it's a comment. When you gave all the things that made Bytemobile successful, you missed one. Inspiring leadership. You know that we would not have worked the way we did to work ourselves to the bone like that. People like you hadn't been there right with us, working late into the night, listening to all our problems, having an open door policy at all times, and just being there for us. It's one of the things I think that made the company successful.
Well, thank you so much.
Student, he worked for 12 years, still, that's great.
Santanu was badge number 1 at Bytemobile, PhD from Illinois, and very generous in his comments. At the end of the day, it's all about people. It really is all about people.
Okay, one more question, last one from
Following along on that last comment, could you talk about your role after the CEO came in? Because it sounded like you were very involved, the leadership, the direction, the vision, the tone of the company. Did that continue after the CEO, and what was your dynamics with that CEO that came in?
I was a jack of all trades in many ways. The one thing that remained consistent was my passion about the technology, the solution. So I remained very involved I was trying to extricate myself from the details and look at, a little bit beyond the 12 or 18-month horizon. And with the help of our customers, that was perhaps the most useful thing I did. I would spend time with the people that were spending the money on us. I was very lucky in sort of guessing where things would be. So that was I think the value that I brought to the company. But as I said, I would lose sleep literally because it became very personal. I think this is very common with all the entrepreneurs who start companies. It becomes very personal, right? Failure is not an option. So when you navigate through very rough seas, either due to global economic conditions or due to, sometimes market realities, etc., you lose sleep, literally. And you end up doing everything from, keeping the midnight light going and cleaning the floor, if you wish, to essentially becoming a salesman at chief, selling, literally, going along. And I did part of that. Inspiring our people, listening to our people, walking the corridors, trying to understand, who are happy campers, who are unhappy campers, what you can do, And one thing, I did my fair share of mistakes, no question about that. And I had a couple of good qualities. One of them was that I knew my weaknesses, and they outnumbered my strengths. But I knew them, okay? And I was trying to, the fear of failure made me very, very aware of my weaknesses. In some cases, though, for example, we went through phases where one particular territory was suffering, revenue-wise, because we had the wrong person, a person without commitment, as an example, right? I could see it, nobody else could see it. And that was very tough for me, very difficult, to try to convince my other partners that we had to make change, we had to make difficult decisions. There were a few special cases like this, but it's never a smooth sailing, right?
Let me, I'll have the last question. So one question is, if you had...
You're entitled to that.
Yeah, but I'm going to ask now. So if you had to, like you said, you would be an entrepreneur again, after having gone through this experience. My question is, would you start a company, again, focusing on service providers or operators as your target?
That's a very nice question. You're asking me a question, Naveen, that I'm trying to answer to answer for myself. Yes, I would. I would, and I would do it. I think I would do it better this time.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why I think I would. One of the things I mispredicted was the timing, and I was not alone. But I expected that the so-called data tsunami would be with us in 2005, 2006. Right? It took another 6 years, another 5 years, 2010. And that had a huge impact on us. But it is here now. It is here now, and operators will have to really make will have to depart from the way they do business. And I think that Lionel here may agree or may disagree, but I see that happening. Operators are more willing to open up the door and listen to the value that small companies bring to the table, and it was almost impossible. They were impenetrable 8 years ago. So now is a lot better timing than when we started.
I really admire your guts again. So anyways, last question now for the audience and for aspiring entrepreneurs is, let's say, where do you see are the opportunities for them other than network operators? You get a lot of them probably.
I believe the areas of growth, again, this is very, very subjective answer, because I'm a believer of cloud computing. I spent part of my academic career working with cloud computing. It was not called cloud computing, but we built actually a cloud back in 1997. Effectively, what was a cloud? And some of you may know NCSA at the University of Illinois has invested a lot in cloud computing, etc. I believe cloud computing is still going to go through a lot of evolution. It needs a lot of innovation before it becomes, the standard way of doing business, addressing, efficiencies and etc. for the enterprise and the service providers. The so-called big data, the ability to manage both storage of data repositories that grow exponentially and make sense out of it. I think that's a fairly nascent space, because the meat is in the AI engines, or the intelligence layer that makes sense of that data, and it makes sense for certain vertical industries. I think there's a lot of growth there. In the operator space, I see huge opportunities. Huge opportunities. So, given that I spent 12 years of my life selling to these guys, I wouldn't mind continuing doing that.
You need to have a strong spine and a lot of finances.
Yeah, well, my hair changed color anyway, so I don't have to worry about that.
I just had the spine left after 7 years. Okay, all right. Let's give a big round of applause.
Thank you.